welcome back to Real with Lame. We're gonna analyze His House, which was released in 2020.
Hi, I'm Lex. I use any pronouns.
I'm Ava. I also use any pronouns.
I'm Michaela. I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Esther, and I also use she, her pronouns.
So we are going to be analyzing His House, released in 2020. It was directed by Remi Weekes, and it was filmed and based in the United Kingdom. It's about a refugee couple that escaped from South Sudan during a war between two tribes, and it shows their life in a town close to London. As the film progresses, we see their struggles to adjust in their new lifestyle while also encountering horrifying evils in their home that terrorize them through the film.
Okay. So specifically, we're going to be talking about scenes that establish like some sort of perspective, and so we're gonna start chronologically.
Mhm.
And so mine is when Rial goes outside to try to find the clinic, and we see her walking around trying to figure out where she is, and then she goes up to these young boys just asking for directions, and they end up mocking her accent, like generally being like xenophobic. And so I wanted to talk about like her costume choice, like as she's getting nitpicked, like she's getting made fun of by these young boys. She's wearing like a bright red like a bright red jacket, I think. And it stands out from like the kind of dull surroundings around them, and generally it's a very like bright, vivid red. So yeah. And as like these young boys are like just coming up with all these different like directions of going, obviously trying to mess with her, the camera is like turning, spinning, and it kind of shows like how she doesn't really know where she is, and these guys are just all giving her different answers, so she's just so confused and just trying to make sense of the situation. Oh, and this is also done like in all one long shot, like as she goes up to them, asks them like, hey, where am I supposed to go? And then they just start messing with her, and as she's walking off, the sound like ramps up really high, which I think just kind of shows like how she's feeling after this, because especially being alone as a woman walking around like it, and just having these young boys just mess with you in a place where you haven't been before, like it can just be it's just a lot. I can imagine for her. Yeah, so I have the costume, like the camera spinning, the long take, and just the sound ramping up as we see her walk away from these boys.
Yeah, I also thought that the camera movements were really interesting because like as the camera is swirling, it really just shows how disoriented she is, because they just keep giving her new directions, new directions, new directions, and she just doesn't know where to go and where they're telling her to go. And it just like it makes you feel her like anxiety and her confusion as well, because as the viewer you're also really lost and confused as the camera's just going around like crazy, like you're on a Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
I think that really helps with the perspective. Like Wax mentioned, that we're talking about perspective and point of view. So perspective being like who you're siding with, like whose story you're getting from it, and then the point of view being like visually where you're seeing it from. I think the point of it being the disorienting camera being really interesting, because it also helps with the perspective because she's confused, but you're also visually seeing them. And as somebody outside of it, you're like, oh, these guys are making fun of her. But you're also getting her perspective of like, she doesn't understand they're making fun of her. She's not hearing that or seeing that.
Yeah.
She's just confused. She doesn't understand the malicious intent, and that's really pushed forward through the framing and the choices made in the scene.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also noticed that leading up to that part of that scene, when Rial is kind of like going around in circles trying to find an exit somewhere, and we can see like she keeps coming up to that one boy who's playing basketball, and like she's just kind of like really confused on where to go, and that's kind of like building up her anxiety going into that situation. And so I think like with the guys all making fun of her and shouting at her and saying these very like, you know, racist things to her, I think like her also feeling confusion and like she's almost trapped in a sense is amplified through those elements. So I think like leading up to that specific scene as well is really important to note.
Yeah. I think also the dialogue choice of like her saying Church Street.
Yeah.
And like that moment, you don't even realize they're being like racist. Like, because like if you're looking at like the subtitles, he's one of the boys turns to one of the other ones and says, "Look, it's her auntie," which is like,
Right.
Yeah.
if you're in a tribe in Africa, or like a lot of cultures have like older women being considered aunts. And then he's like, it's in a condescending way, but he's like, you don't realize it as soon as he starts talking. He's like making fun of how she's saying, he's like church tree, because she's having trouble with the ch in English.
Yeah.
And
And then he's like Church Street darling.
yeah, and that's like, it's obviously condescending, but like if you're not paying attention to it, it doesn't
Yeah.
sound condescending. The first moment you realize, like, obviously they're fucking with her with giving the different directions, but like the first moment you realize that they're being racist, if you're not like paying
Yeah.
attention, is when he says go back to Africa as she's walking away.
Right.
But I think it's also like helping show her perspective of the situation.
Yeah, 100%. I think dialogue has a way of changing perspective because at first, like, if you weren't really paying attention to the undertones, it could kind of seem like they were being genuinely confused. And that's from her perspective as well. She thought that they were also just genuinely confused. But as their dialogue changes to more of like an aggressive tone, I think like that also goes with the fact that they were making fun of her and her anxiety like increasing.
Yeah, and also like as they start messing with her more, that's when the camera starts spinning, which I think is
Yeah.
helping with that moment.
Yeah, and she also like uses her native language at the beginning of the scene, I think, which also like for them clocks, oh, she's an outsider, she's not from here. And also like just her accent in general, like you said, like where they mock her for it, and her using her native language, it's like, oh, speak English, like it's so ignorant. And that's when it's like not subtle, but it's like explicit
Yeah.
racism.
I think also something that you brought up earlier, Lex, like the lighting. I think the lighting that I noticed in that scene was very like cold, and I know that they were outside, so it might just be really harsh lighting because of that. But I think also like whenever they're in the house, even though there's a lot of scary things happening there, it's more dark, warmer lighting. And this is almost kind of like high exposure, like I'm being exposed to the real reality of people's perspectives here. And so I think that that can also play into like the overall tone.
I think it's also a lot of the not warmth, because I don't want to call it warmth when I'm talking about the house, because it doesn't
Right, yeah.
doesn't
It doesn't
feel
feel, it's not
warm.
warm
It's
as
not
in like
warm, it just-
comforting.
But it's like the
Visually, it looks
lighting
warm.
tone is physically warm.
Tone, yeah.
I feel like
Tone of the
it's
lighting
better,
is, but
I feel like it'd be better to say hot, because warm means like comfort, but hot is like uncomfortable.
That is what I
Yeah.
meant.
Yeah.
I think what helps with that is like, it's when they're outside, specifically in that point, it's very, I'm having a really hard time explaining this. It's very concrete. Like
Mhm.
the surroundings
Yeah.
are concrete. There's no real green happening, which like when you're outside, you associate it with being like not, it also seems to be like winter, maybe leading into spring at this time period, because like the way they're dressed kind of informs, like they're all wearing pants, no one's really wearing shorts, even the boys that are outside. They seem to be in a school uniform of sorts. And she's wearing a red sweatshirt, like zip up sweatshirt, which implies that maybe it's a little cold out. I think that also like makes it feel cooler
Yeah.
and the lighting feel more like physically isolating, because it doesn't feel like summer. Like it's not hot, it's not inviting outside,
Yeah.
both physically temperature wise and like environmental wise and socially.
Mhm.
Yeah, because like who wants to go on a stroll on a cold, wintry day
Yeah.
compared to like a nice, summery, inviting day that like makes you want to go out?
Mhm.
Is that all you wanted to talk about, Lex? For your scene?
I think we pretty much got everything. Yeah. If you want to start talking about yours, Ava.
Yep. Sure, I can do that. So I can do that, maybe.
Just
The
maybe.
scene I want to talk about is pretty much almost directly after the scene Lex was talking about. There's like a doctor scene, but then there's this scene where they're sitting on the floor eating dinner, and Riel is telling the story of the apath. I'm gonna say
Yes,
that
yes,
wrong
yes.
too. I'm
Yes,
gonna
I think
say
that's
it with
yeah.
confidence.
Yeah.
Apath. And there's a couple of really moments that happen in that scene. Obviously, when she's telling the story, it, like we mentioned, the lighting is hot. We'll refer to it. I still want to call it warm lighting because that one feels like, obviously she's telling a really scary story, but like they're together and it's not, nothing scary is happening in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it's physically a warm light. You can tell it's reddish. It's almost reddish, orange. It's lighting both of them. She's definitely wearing, no, she's wearing white. I keep thinking she's wearing red, but that's just because everything around her is kind of red. But she's wearing white, and she's telling the story of the Apeth, which is like this cursed being, a night witch that curses somebody and haunts them, basically. And what's really interesting about the scene is, one, they're eating dinner, and they're eating a traditional meal from where they're from, South Sudan, or at least I assume. Maybe it's just like an African cuisine. I don't like want to say for sure that it's South Sudan specific, because it looks like a food that like I've seen before. I can't remember the name of it, but she's eating it with her hand throughout the scene, and her husband goes and gets forks, and he's like, eat with a fork, which I think is a really like mise en scène choice. It's also probably a script choice, so that had to be written, and no one was improvising that in the moment. And also perspective wise, it's shot primarily over, is his name Bull?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
Bull.
want to make sure it is Bull. I know that for sure. I just want to make sure I was saying it right. Bull.
Yeah.
It's shot kind of over his shoulder. You don't see him for the primarily throughout the scene, unless it's like a reverse shot where you see him sitting opposite of her, looking at her like she's crazy, which, given the story she's telling, kind of valid. Also, given his lived life experiences the past 2 days, felt. Got you. I understand. I also would have looked at her like she was crazy. But it also makes it so the scene isn't really from her point of view. It's from his point of view and kind of his perspective of what she's saying, because he does interrupt her at points, being like, you're not making any sense right now. You're kind of being crazy. But those are kind of the key points that I wanted to talk about throughout the scene.
You mentioned how when he was giving the fork to her, and I just want to mention that his face wasn't shown in that. Like, it was like just his hand and her taking it, I think. And so I think that is kind of establishes like him. I don't know if it's a direct point of view shot, but like looking down and like handing it to her and then her taking it.
Yeah.
That might also be used to establish Bill's perspective.
I feel like the dialogue during that scene was also really because when they're eating with the fork and then she first tries it and she's clearly disgusted and she says it tastes of metal, and then he says you'll get used to it,
And
then
he's like smiling. He's having a great time in the corner.
And it really shows like we really get in there and see like how one of them is like trying to adapt really hard and then the other one is like resisting adapting.
Yeah.
And it shows how clashing they are together and how they're not on the same page at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, like, towards the beginning of the scene, he's talking about how, like, she's going crazy because she's sitting in the house by herself all day, and he's like, please leave the house.
Yeah.
But yeah, she thinks that Real thinks that she's sane. And
Yeah,
that
she's
actually,
also
like, talking to her daughter. So
yeah, she's dead set that she's talking to her daughter.
yeah,
She
and like I
Yeah.
don't blame her. I mean, if my husband sat there and called me crazy for the stuff that I was seeing, I would be like, what? But because I think part of it that goes along with the dialogue, at least, is that she's saying things that he knows inside are true because he has had his own weird experiences with the house. And instead of him acknowledging that, Rael might be right about this, like Bull is kind of more, no, we need to make this work because this is the dream, and like we need to assimilate as soon as possible. So like subtleties like using the fork and stuff like that, I think kind of like move that at least perspective, like metaphorical perspective along more.
Yeah, I also think it's really that the perspectives kind of switch from when we're first really introduced to them, when they're like they're not at the house yet. I know this is like really random, but like when they're not at the house, it really seems like she's the one who's more dead set about them getting out of there.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get to the house, and then she's like, no, I don't want to assimilate anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be like here with my daughter, who isn't even really her daughter. Like, it's really like, whoa, what is happening? But I also think I'm just going to connect it to another film real quick.
Mhm.
No one really needs to add to this. Just figured I'd add it.
Why not?
That specific scene really reminds me of this scene in Inception where Mal is about to kill herself. Sorry, spoilers for
relatable.
Inception. So relatable, so related.
I didn't mean relatable, but accidentally relatable came out. I meant
Yeah,
like,
no, you're good.
But no, so relatable. You know,
so relatable when Mal goes and kills herself.
like, don't you all just like sit outside on a windowsill late at night?
Yeah, yeah. But they have like a couple of similar lines where it's like, in the scene she said, not Mal, sorry, let me clarify who I'm talking about. Rael says it would guide us back to her, referring to their fake daughter. And in Inception she's like, no, they're not real, they're not our real kids. So it's very like similar and pulled out of, like, as soon as she said, like, as I was watching that, I was like, this reminds me of something. I know this reminds me of something. I can't remember for the life of me what this reminds me of, but it's definitely something I've seen before. And I think that there's a lot of moments in the film, at least that I saw, that connect to other movies. Like, clearly he's pulling from other sources to help with the perspective and point of view elements, especially with the horror elements. Like, those are easier to make the connections with, but even in these like more, I wouldn't say calmer, because I don't necessarily think this is a very calm moment. Yeah. Especially like after she finishes talking and saying that it would guide her back to her daughter, and she just like starts to like smile, and you're like, stop it, what are you doing? That's like such a weird reaction you're having right now. Yeah. It's like also the most malicious smile I've ever seen. It's like, it's horrifying. Like she's possessed. It's like there's something else causing her to smile. Like she's trying to be like, yeah, I'm normal. But no, I'm normal. It's fine. And you're like, you're not being normal. You're being crazy.
Yeah. No, I found what you said in about how like how the director pulled from like other movies. Like the whole point of perspective is to make you feel with the like actor, like the people in the film. And like a part of feeling it is having those experiences. And a lot of people have to have those experiences, and it has to be something like in life for you like to be able to feel that. So it makes sense that it's also like he pulls from other films, because you're not gonna have like an original, like an whole original experience that no one else has had. It's like some like really weird, like out of pocket.
Yeah, especially like with some of the horror elements where it's like, like I could not have been the only person when like he heard noises. I was like, why the fuck are you going towards that noise?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Come on.
That's such a classic horror thing.
Let's be smarter than this.
Just like everyone in a horror movie is like, oh, creepy noise, let's go right towards it. Great
Yeah,
idea.
like there's like a lot of moments like that in like that's so stereotypical like slasher horror, but I wouldn't even consider this movie slasher horror because like it's
Yeah.
not that's not the vibe of
Also,
the
who looks
film.
at a hole and hears noises and then
Yeah,
goes
who
to put
sticks
your
their
head
hand in
and
that hole?
face like and your
Yeah,
hand
no.
in there?
Like I got to that point and I was like, no.
And when
no.
the bird comes out in that once, oh my
Yeah.
god.
Oh my
No.
I was deceased. I was
no.
No,
No
that
more.
this was the most horrifying thing I've ever watched, like for
It's
sure.
like, let's put my hand in this deep pit I can't see, and then his hand could have been chopped off for all he knew. Like it
Yeah.
could have been gone. He could have lost it.
So when she's like telling the story, like the back of Bull's head is shown at first, and then like as she keeps talking more and more, I feel like the camera kind of like pushes it. It's not a zoom in, I think it's like a push in towards her, and you can't really see the back of his head anymore. So I think that's kind of meant to kind of immerse the story.
Yeah.
And even though Bull's kind of like, girl, you're crazy, but
Yeah, I also think that help like saying that solidified it as Bull's point of view for me is the fact there was no flashback, because like in this moment, if it had been any other film, I feel like that would have been a flashback moment where they would have
Yeah.
shown like maybe not even like shown her mother telling her the story, but like shown like the story in a way, like in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when they're telling the story of the Deathly Hallows and it's the animated version of the story that's being told. Like it gave that energy, but was pushing in on her. It wasn't showing us any new information that we didn't already have at the beginning of the scene. Like it was solely her, so it very much felt from the point of view of somebody physically in that room, not from the audience's point of view in a way.
yeah, definitely.
I
Yeah.
think adding on to what you just said, I think something to note is within that scene, the kind of like not really juxtaposition, but more contrast between elements that you were mentioning formally. So like lighting, the lighting is very warm toned, but they're having a very like cool toned conversation, if that makes sense, like a very uptight conversation, but also within the dialogue, I noticed that like Rael is talking very like softly and almost like she's kind of like it's not really it is an intense conversation, but she's not like urgently like we need to get out of this house, this is the story that my mother told me, like whatever. She's more just like kind of passively telling him this like story, and it's not like they're both freaking out or anything, they're both kind of just like okay, like whatever, having a very like passive conversation. And I think that contrasts the vibe that they were going for that specific scene.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very much like high anxiety, we need to get out of here, this is, we're cursed, and yet they're talking about it like it's, just another conversation over the dinner table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another
Except they're not at the dinner table.
They're not at the dinner table, they're on the floor.
Which was another thing that he was like, let's next time, let's try to eat at a table next time. We're not uncivilized.
Yeah, but that yeah.
It also doesn't even feel like she wants to leave. Like she's saying in her story that she's like, we need to leave.
But there's no urgency in her.
There's no urgency. It also doesn't feel like I mean, obviously like the sound in the background is giving you like, get the fuck out of this house. But like
the score in the background is like
the score in the background, it's like I think that was one of the scarier elements for me because like it never gave you a break, even in these
and
moments.
Yeah, it was constant. It was like it didn't end. It was constant. It was always there, and it was always like this low humming, and it was like really intense while at the same time being really low.
Yeah. Also, hang on, I'm just looking at the IMDb because I want to give a shout out to whoever did the sound design for this film because that person killed it. Sorry,
yeah, absolutely killed it. The sounds in this film were like amazing. My anxiety was always on peak.
Yeah, because like even like in moments like this, or when another scene we're gonna discuss, that's Michaela's scene that's coming up next. Like even when he's stopping, like there's no
it's always like
of levity.
Yeah, they don't give you a break.
They never give you a break. Please, why?
But I think that's the point of horror movies in general. It's just you're not like sometimes it's good to get like a little break because then like when you get a break and then get it taken away from you, it can cause even more anxiety. But also when you just start having constant, you're just always on the edge of your seat, always on edge, feeling your anxiety spike and spike and spike because you never like it's just constant.
I'm gonna fuck that person's name. If somebody else wants to look up the IMDb and tell me what that person...
I will try.
I think it's
Just you don't
it's
have to.
Roche Bonos.
Okay. Do you guys want to move to Michaela's?
Yeah, Michaela's.
Take
All
your time.
yours.
Okay. So the next scene I wanted to discuss was the scene where it was a scene following when he like has his meltdown and he grabs all of their stuff that they brought back from home and he puts it on the ground and just puts it in a fire. And following that scene, like it cuts right over to like him in a very, very white and bright mall. Like you go from this really, really dark scene that's like all like warm and dark to this like it hurt my eyes when it transitioned to this like completely white and cool color and then like him just walking up into the mall.
It's
And, like,
obviously not Old Navy, but it feels very Old Navy-esque.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
it does.
it feels like Old Navy or the Gap.
In a bad way.
yeah.
Not
In a
good
bad
way.
way.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah,
worst
not-
way possible.
Yep.
Or like PacSun? No, not PacSun. Primark? Has anyone
Yeah.
been into a Primark? Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
so
that's
sorry.
like a British store too.
Yeah,
So
it's
that
Primark.
actually
It's like-
that's a
It might
good
be-
comparison.
Tequila, we totally interrupted your okay.
Sorry,
No,
I'm
no,
so
it's good.
sorry.
Continue.
No, it's good.
Shut up now.
But yeah, no, it is like that's the feeling they want you to feel. It's like it's weirdly familiar, but at the same time it's extremely off-putting because of how bright it is and how much it hurts your eyes and just like the complete contrast. And then when you go in, one thing I did want to mention is that you can see the security guard following him and like watching him as he's shopping. And then I'll get more into that in a bit. But then as he's shopping, he goes over to the polo shirts and he's looking at them for a second. And then he turns around and then the camera transitions to like a view of him and it's a deep depth of field view and his figure is like blurry and it's like the back of his head is blurry and then you just get this huge like view of this family all wearing like really cheesy shirts with and they're all smiling and stuff like that and it's advertising shirts to wear and then like he chooses those shirts for
Yeah, it
him
cuts-
and his wife.
It
I just
cuts
want to
to her
add
wearing
this.
the wife shirt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to add this family is white.
Yeah.
It is.
It's white.
Yeah,
They're white.
no, the family is white. Like it's I was gonna get into that. It's the generic it's like the generic family, like the generic like British family. And like he sees that and he's like, I need that. Like because when we're in that like blurry view, it's kind of like we're having a moment to like process his thoughts and we're seeing, oh, like he's realizing he needs that because you realize he thinks that when he grabs the stuff and then he leaves and then it cuts to the scene of his wife wearing that blue shirt that woman was that white woman was wearing.
And
Um,
he also
and-
must seem uncomfortable in it.
yeah. And also like I'm sorry, but the specific polo shirt that they gave him is like such a just it's so generic. Like it's just like that's what I imagine of like a white college boy wearing in England.
Yeah.
Like and his parents chose his clothes for him. That's what I imagine that kind of person to wear. And that's what that's what he was chosen to wear. And then another thing I wanted to mention was the score in that scene. Like normally when you go shopping, you aren't really scared, but when he was shopping, the score was like it was constant throughout the entire time. And it sounded like and like when it was that blurry scene, it sounded like a car was driving by, but it was really distorted and like unsettling. And it happened twice. It happened like right before when he was looking at the polo, and then when he turned around to look, and it happened when he was staring at the white family. And like all these like high-pitched noise that are like unsettling. It's just like it really adds to like how like he's trying so hard to become a part of a world that's both rejecting him and also his wife is also rejecting.
I think it's also interesting to note that the sound design for those moments, like when they're interacting with white suburbia, is different than the sounds used in the house.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like it's very like the horror element of the sound design is really interestingly used of like there's the horror of like I don't want to say like horror of white people, but like there's the horror of like
horror of the white
society.
Horror of white
Society is
people.
actually the correct term. The horror of society. I don't know why I said white people. I'm sorry.
The
No,
horror
the
of
horror
white
of the
people.
white
This is really-
suburbs.
No,
Yeah.
so real.
Good,
That's valid. The
beautiful.
horror of the white suburbs. I like that. That's a quote
Yes.
I'm gonna use now.
That's gonna be our thumbnail.
Yes, horror of the white suburbs.
Of like society is like because like of where they're from, like the background we got in the background in the flashbacks, not in the background, in the flashbacks, you're getting the element of like they lived, I don't want to say in the middle of nowhere, but kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like there wasn't a lot of traffic noise. So like going from that to living in a city, like those city noises would be its own type of horror for them.
Yeah.
It was also really while we had those like city horror noises, sorry. I also there was like low beat drums as well at some points, like in the middle before the city noises came in. And the drums were like really, really subtle and quiet, but you could hear them. And it was like kind of eerie, but I think it was like an interesting contrast because it was drums when he was walking in, and then it turned to those city noises when he saw the white family.
Because
So
I
that
think
really ties in with
it
your
is white horror. I told you.
Yes, it is white horror. You were right. It was just very
It was an
I was off
accurate
guard.
description. It's white people horror.
And
Because
I
like
just
because it's
Sorry.
following. Go ahead.
I just want to say the white people in this movie look so British. Like I don't
do?
understand. Like they do. Like
They do.
I understand. Like Matt Smith, like he is British.
Yeah.
He is British, and he just looks British.
Wow, the British people look British.
Crazy. That's
It's
wild.
like that is so, but like you get what I mean. Like
Yeah,
they
I get
look
what you mean.
weird.
I get what you mean. I just thought that was really funny because it is based in England, and I'm like, wow, the
The
British,
British
people
people look British.
Wow.
But I also, like I was saying, sorry, I'm going back to what I was saying.
No, you're good.
Before Lex added that. When the camera's following him, it keeps the like traditional drum. So it's like he is like
He is the
it's not
outlier.
African drums, but like the drum is following him as the outsider.
Yeah, he's the
then-
outlier, while everything else is just like the
Yeah.
white horror, and
Yeah.
he's like going into the white horror, into this like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that from now on in my vocabulary. That's a part of my vocabulary
White
now.
horror.
Is white horror.
I just wanted to add that I think something to like notice within the scene that you're talking about is definitely the contrast of lighting, but also just the way that so like we see the security guard following him, but it's not like it's so in your face that we just are focusing on the security guard. We are focusing on Bull the entire time, and it's honestly like the focus is not on the security guard at all. You kind of have to look closely to see it.
Yeah, because he's in the corner.
I'll be honest, I missed it.
And
I
and so-
watched it several times.
You
I did
barely
not see the
it 'cause
security
he's
guard.
in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that that's important to note because I think the discrimination and the racism that they're experiencing while they are trying to assimilate into this new place can also be very subtle. And I think that that's a message that they're trying to send because the security guard is kind of blurry in the background and you only notice it if you look closely, and he doesn't even notice it. And so it's like I think that it is very intentional to try and set it up like that. And so I think that it's like important that you mentioned that because I think that like all of these different like formal elements of like camera and lighting, like they all do have to go with like the undertones that are like a theme throughout.
Exactly.
I think also like the subtlety of the racism is like so
prominent. Yeah.
but it's weird because it's subtle. It's prominent but subtly prominent.
So I am the last one to go and also literally the last scene in the movie.
Very fitting.
Yeah. I basically just want to go over the last scene where I'm forgetting his name, forgive me. Don't take points off, please.
Matt Smith. It's Matt Smith.
Matt Smith. Matt
We
Smith.
refer to him as Matt Smith. Don't worry
Smith.
about it.
But so basically he comes in and him and his partners and his colleagues are all, observing the house, whatever. After they leave, we can kind of see the couple Rael and Bol, they turn their attention towards the hallway in front of them into the other room, and we see their point of view. They had just finished talking about how, you know, like after the Matt guy
Matt Smith.
talks about, yep,
Toxic who guy.
like how do you still see her, referring to Nyagak, their daughter, and you know, he has this
Sorry,
monologue.
Matt Smith. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just confirming because I didn't see
oh,
this.
you're totally fine. He basically asks, like, do you still see her? And Bol goes on, you know, kind of like a monologue about how you have to live with your demons and face them, and it's only once you let them in that you can actually be at peace and live with them. So then in the next scene that I'm referring to, we see Rael and Bol's like perspective of their fake daughter, Nyagak. I think that's how you pronounce it.
I think so.
You know, in the doorway, standing still, and then we get a straight cut to Rael and Bol standing in the middle of what I think is their tribe at home, which is what they were referring to after, like about their whole heritage and stuff like that. And then we get another straight cut going into them standing by themselves, like the whole tribe standing by themselves, as like as if Rael and Bol are like looking at them directly. So it's like from their point of view. And I think that can signify like a perspective change, not only literally but metaphorically as well, because we're actually seeing, you know, them actually seeing their ghosts in front of them from their eyes, but also seeing how their perspective changes metaphorically, like going from, you know, I'm being haunted by these to accepting the fact that they live with them now. And I think like the straight cuts are an aspect of that for sure. And I also noticed after the straight cuts, there is a change of the camera angle where they do a close-up shot of Rael and Bol holding hands. And I think that also shows like unity and acceptance. And I also noticed that this kind of goes in with costume, but as they were holding hands, like Rael is wearing her wedding band. And I think that kind of signifies like they were having a lot of relationship issues throughout this entire film, but that kind of shows like their unity, change of perspective as well. And something else about outfit choices is like as a couple, they are both wearing like very stereotypical like British clothing instead of like what they were wearing in the beginning of the film, which is more like traditionally from where they, you know, came from, like the clothing that they would usually wear there, which I thought was definitely like signifying like a change in their perspective and the fact that they've accepted that this is their home. And also I just wanted to talk about the sound that plays in the background. I don't really know what song it is, but I do remember that it's a song that I think is being sung like in their native language. And it's kind of like subtle in the background, but it's not anything horrifying like it has been the entire time. It's very like positive and almost like lighthearted. And I think that also reflects the overall theme of like show don't tell and like them accepting it as a whole. And so I think like they're accepting their past and they're accepting their future like through these formal elements.
So just adding on to like the stuff about the music playing in like a positive manner and like tying this back to like the narrative structure that we just learned, I would say that this scene is definitely the denouement of the film, because it's literally the only moment of happiness in this film.
Yeah.
Literally is only the only moment of happiness, like especially because of the well,
there's like the first scene when they're told they got housing and they're like,
Right,
yay,
like,
and then it's just
yeah.
downhill from there.
Yeah. But yeah, that definitely like ties up the film. And like you said with like the relationship film issues they've been having in the film, just like the simple like band like just brings it all full circle and even resolves that as well.
Something I want to talk about was when you were talking about how like the cuts of them like looking at each other, the way that I viewed it a little differently. I saw it as like, so it first started off with them and then it cut off to their fake daughter, and then it cut to like so there was the group with the daughter and the group with them, and like a common theme through the film is, I think, survivor's guilt.
Mm,
They had a lot of survivor's guilt for surviving and the daughter not making it, and that was like the whole point of all their horrors, was just that they survived because of the daughter, but the daughter didn't. And
right.
like, and I think like at the end of the film, them looking into that room and seeing all those people with the daughter, I see that as those being the people who didn't make it. And then when it cuts to them with the rest of the people, it's all the people who did make it. And it shows how they're finally getting over their survivor's guilt and coming to terms that they aren't the only ones who survived, and
Right.
that they surely took opportunity away from someone else, kind of, but also like they finally come to terms like, hey, we aren't the only ones and we deserve to be happy as well. And
Right.
yes, these people died and we feel really bad for them, but we aren't the only ones. We shouldn't have the survivor's guilt anymore. And it just shows like the release of this guilt off them. But
I-
that's how I interpreted the end of the film. And like, that's
That
how I think one of the interpretations you can take as a viewer at that end. It's just seeing how like they finally have come to terms with everything and they're ready to like start a new life and start something new.
I agree. I also think like adding on to what you just said, which I think is a really good perspective to have. I think it's like I noticed how usually when they are having flashback sequences, or it's more like I don't know, like I remember like the scenes where like they are being haunted by like, you know, their tribe or whatever. I think those were very aggressive, and I think this kind of shows like both perspectives like seeing each other, because they are literally facing each other.
Yeah.
And whether that's like in a metaphorical sense or like a physical sense or whatever, I think it's more of like neither of them are saying anything, they're just seeing each other. And I think that also goes into like the whole perspective change. Instead of it being like this aggressive crazy thing, it's just that. And I also want to note, I know this is like a fifth element, but like the lighting, I think it's very bright, which is completely contrast from what we see usually in the room that they are in. Like it's usually very dark, very scary.
Yeah.
And instead they're seeing each other in like a very bright light, but not in the harsh lighting that we see like outside when, you know, Lex and Michaela, what you were talking about with your scenes. It's instead more of like a, you know, this is our home, like we're cleansed, like we are at peace, kind of.
One thing I just wanted to add, you did say that they dress more kind of British than they did at the beginning of the film, but I still want to add, like, they're still dressing more colorfully, like compared to like the inspectors that were in the room.
Yeah.
I think that kind of shows like they still are holding on a little bit to their culture, but they're stepping forward into their future in England.
I think it's good because like near the end we can kind of, I think we can like infer that like they're finally like, I think they both learned a lesson where um like one learned like, oh, I need to accept this new place and learn how to accept some of it. And then like Bull learned like, I can't let go of everything that used to be my life. I still need to hold on to those parts of me and
Right.
accept those in my life in relation to also this new life. And they both like, I think like what you said, like with them holding hands, like it really just shows how they finally came together on one term. And it really just shows like their connection, because like you said, they've been like fighting throughout the entire film on different they're like on different planes. And then
Right.
finally their hands coming together just shows them on the same plane again and comes to like an equal standing.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree.
This seems like a crazy good ending. I'm sorry I missed it.
It
Can't add
was kind of
anything.
tied the whole thing together, I'm not gonna lie.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
it was a
sorry.
really
It
good
was scary.
I don't blame you. I kind of just
I'm
haven't
a
told
little
them time too, so. But just one other thing that I wanted to mention, now that we're getting into it, because I just like loved that scene so much. Like I know that like the ending scene is like, you know, whatever, like it's
ties
supposed
it
to be
together.
almost like tied together, but I just like loved it, and it gave me so much peace after the shit show that entire movie was. But I loved seeing Nyagak, their fake daughter or whatever, like without her creepy ass mask on. And I
Yeah.
think that was also noteworthy because for once throughout like the entire, besides like the flashback scenes where she was on the boat and everything, like she wasn't hiding anymore within their house. Like she wasn't wearing that mask. And I think like she, you know, was like wearing very traditional clothing and whatever. And I wanted to bring that up because I thought that that was a very like intentional.
So to tie this all together, I have a question for all of you.
And for Professor
So-
Manon.
And
Yes.
for,
And for Professor Manon, yes. So do you all remember the scene where he went absolute batshit crazy and started banging like holes in everything, and then he used the excuse it was rats? I would like to know, what would your guys' excuse be?
For the inspector.
for the
the
inspector, definitely electrical issues, because at the
Yeah.
very beginning, from the very beginning, it's an electrical issue. Like even the inspector flips on the light and he's like, oh shit, that doesn't work. So like all the electrical is in the wall, so like maybe Bull is trying to fix the electrical.
I have like a funnier one. I would just say like I was dancing and I slipped and I fell into the wall.
In 20
Multiple
different
times
places.
and multiple
Yes.
Multiple times,
But
multiple
I was wearing
places.
socks. Listen, I was wearing socks. I slipped and I fell a lot. Even though you can't tell because my body looks fine.
Right.
But you know.
Yeah. 100%.
That's true. What would your excuse be?
I think mine would either be like construction, or I would pretend that somebody like broke in and just be like, the lock didn't work. I'm so like remember
Well, the
'cause
door was fucked up. That's
in the
actually a good
beginning,
one.
the door was fucked up and it didn't lock or anything. Like
And also,
just be like, oh my god, it's a dangerous neighborhood. Not my fault. I
but
don't know.
also there was that girl who like just straight up peed in their backyard, which I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then she's like, oh shit, somebody lives here, so like,
Yeah.
it's feasible that they like somebody like broke in.
Yeah,
Um,
but I don't get why they didn't they could have like in the last scene what pissed me off was that they could have painted over the entire thing and hid it. Because it was just white splotches all over the like it was already fixed by the end.
Yeah.
And then they could have just painted over it and
Yeah.
nobody would have known.
I think it could have been, I think it's because they didn't have enough money to buy paint, probably.
No, I get that. Like I get that there
Yeah.
was a reasoning behind it because they had kind of had but like it just was like, oh my god, this could have literally been solved.
Like if they do throw a fit, like if the film, I know this is like rhetorical, but like if they did throw a fit, all you had to do is paint it and then it's fine. But I was for my excuse, I would have been like, oh, we're just remodeling, and this is like the yucky part of remodeling.
So this concludes another episode of Reels to Reel with L.A.M.E. We hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. That would be so awesome.
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.
All right. Bye.
See you next time.